The sky hung low over the town of Hollow Bend, stitched in gray clouds like an old quilt heavy with memory. Wind slipped through the streets like a rumor not yet spoken out loud. It was the kind of morning where boots struck wood a little slower, where breath turned to mist even after the frost had melted. And on that morning, a gathering formed outside the old courthouse steps, not for law, but for something quieter, crueler. They called it an auction, but was nothing like cattle. No shouts, no jokes, just a small crowd of familiar faces watching something they knew they shouldn't be watching. Catherine McKinley stood still at the center of it, her fingers knotted tight in the fabric of her daughter's sleeves. Two girls, no taller than the knees of the men who'd arrived to bid, clung to her like roots to soil. They didn't cry. Not yet. That came later. One of them, the smaller twin with the broken doll, looked up at her mother as if waiting for this to turn into a bad dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was debt. And debt don't care about dreams. Catherine's hair was tied back in a loose braid, brown with streaks of sun-bleached gold. Her dress was clean but worn, the hem mended with thread that didn't match. She looked every bit the widow, proud, tired, and standing because falling was not an option. Her husband, John McKinley, had died 3 months prior when the ranch finally broke him, first in the back, then in the heart. The land gave nothing. The bank took everything. And the McKinley in-laws took what was left, her. No one in town said much when the in-laws marched her into the square. They carried ledgers, not words. The paper said she and the twins were now collateral, excess burdens to be auctioned to cover what John had borrowed. They called it legal, but Catherine knew better. It was punishment, not for crime but for weakness. Across the square, someone coughed. A man with yellow teeth and a crooked hat leaned against a rail post, smirking. Name was Dugan Hicks, a rancher with more whiskey in his shed than horses in his fields. He nudged the man beside him, said something low, and laughed. When the bidding opened, it was Dugan who raised his hand first. $5, he said, eyes fixed not on Catherine, but on the space just behind her. The crowd didn't move. Silence weighed more than silver that day. Catherine's spine locked like a beam beneath storm wind. Her daughters pressed closer. One whimpered. The auctioneer, one of the in-laws, naturally nodded. 5. Do I hear 6? No hands. No breath. Just Dugan grinning through a mouth full of tobacco. Catherine stared straight ahead. Not at him. Not at anyone. Just the horizon, somewhere past all this. If she could float, she would. If she could fade, disappear. But she didn't get the chance. I'll give 10. The voice came from the side, calm and even, like the first crack of a fire catching hold. Heads turned. A man stepped forward from the edge of the square. No one had noticed him before. He'd been standing near the old smithy wall, half shadowed by an overhang, hat low over his brow. His boots were scuffed but well cared for. His coat was plain. Everything about him said quiet. Silas Boone. People knew the name, though not much else. He was a carpenter by trade, lived out past the old cottonwoods in a house he built himself. Kept to himself, too. Lost his wife 4 winters back. Never remarried. Never seemed to want to. Now here he was, stepping into the middle of the square, like a man late to a game he never wanted to play. Dugan's face twisted. You serious, Boone? You planning to build shelves or raise kids? Silas said nothing. Just looked at Catherine. Not through her. At her. The way a man looks at a storm and chooses to stand in it anyway. $10, the in-law repeated, uncertainty creeping into his voice. Silas reached into his coat, pulled out a small leather pouch. It hit the auction block with a soft clink that echoed louder than any gunshot. Full amount, he said. Don't bother counting. The in-laws looked at each other. Dugan spat in the dirt and stormed off without another word. Catherine said nothing. Her hands still gripped the girls. One of them, the elder twin by 2 minutes and a sliver of strength, looked up at Silas with wide eyes and then back at her mother. The auctioneer cleared his throat, tried to regain some authority. Sold. To Mr. Boone. No one clapped. No one moved. Silas stepped closer, but not too close. He knelt, slow as sunrise, and looked at the twins first. Name's Silas, he said, voice like cedar and wind. I've got a porch swing, a roof that don't leak, and land no one wants. If your mama's willing, you're welcome to come with me. Won't be fancy, but it'll be yours. The girls looked to Catherine. She met Silas's gaze for the first time. Her eyes held questions, warnings, disbelief, but beneath all that something else. Something she hadn't shown in weeks. Not trust. Not yet, but the memory of it. She gave a small nod. And that was that. The crowd dispersed like smoke, unsure of what they'd witnessed. Some whispered. Some walked away faster than they needed to. Miss Edna from the bakery wiped her eyes when no one was looking. Pastor Lane stood with his arms crossed, watching every step they took down the road. Silas walked ahead, giving space. Catherine followed with the twins close behind, her head high, her back straight. She didn't thank him. Not because she wasn't grateful, but because some things are too heavy for words right away. The town of Hollow Bend returned to its business. But the ground felt different, as if someone had set down a truth no one knew how to carry. Later, much later, when the wind turned warm again and the girls had grown bold enough to laugh without looking back, people would ask Catherine what she remembered most from that day. She'd say it was the moment her daughters stopped clinging to her legs. The moment they reached toward Silas's hand instead. The road out to Silas Boone's land didn't follow a map. It curled like a lazy river, winding through brush and low fences, past old cottonwoods that whispered in the breeze. It was a quiet road, one that asked no questions and gave no answers. Catherine walked it with her daughters one step behind, clutching their bundles tied in muslin, eyes darting between every sound, every crow call, every sudden hush. Silas said little as they walked. He led with a steady gait, hat brim pulled low, hands in his coat pockets. But every so often, he'd glance back, not to hurry them, not to check, but just to make sure they were still there. His house came into view slow, rising between swaying fields and brush like it had grown there rather than been built. A wide porch with 2 rocking chairs. A roof of hammered tin, dulled by rain and time. The windows were clean, though simple. No curtains. Just glass and the truth it couldn't hide. He held the gate open and let them through without a word. Inside, the house smelled of pine shavings and coffee long since poured. The floors creaked honest. A stone fireplace stood cold but proud. On the table, a jar of honey sat beside a folded cloth napkin like someone had meant to eat and never got around to it. "You'll sleep in the back room," Silas said, his voice even careful. "I'll keep to the loft. It ain't much, but it's warm. I built it for 2 once. Never imagined 4. Catherine nodded. Her fingers curled a little tighter around the girl's shoulders. They were still watching everything, walls, chairs, the clock that ticked too slow. One of the twins, the smaller one, June, wandered to the fireplace and touched the edge of the stone with her fingers, tracing its cold roughness. "Mind if they touch things?" Silas asked. Catherine blinked, then shook her head. "No, they're gentle." He nodded, then crouched beside June, offering a kind smile without trying to wear it too wide. "If you like, we can start a fire later. Get the place warm before the night rolls in." June didn't answer. She just kept tracing the stone. Her sister Ellie took a half step forward. "Mama makes the best cornbread," she said, like a secret she wasn't supposed to tell. Silas grinned, soft and rare. "Does she now? Well then, I hope I've got enough cornmeal tucked somewhere." It was nothing. Just words. But in that moment, it meant the world. They unpacked in silence. Catherine folded their things neatly into the wooden chest at the foot of the bed. She noticed how the room was clean, swept, and used. A dresser stood waiting with a drawer already half open. A tiny wooden horse sat on the windowsill, carved smooth and unfinished. Someone had left it there years ago, and time hadn't claimed it. That night, the girls fell asleep early, curled on the cot beside her. Catherine sat by the window, listening to the wind stroke the glass like a memory. Downstairs, Silas moved slowly. She heard the soft clatter of dishes, the creak of the floor, the muffled scrape of a chair being pushed back. She wondered why he'd done it. Why any man would pay to take in a widow and 2 girls who came with nothing but debt and history. Not once had he asked her anything. Not once had he looked at her with that glance she'd come to know, the one that weighed a woman as a burden or a prize. He hadn't even looked long enough to see her scars. The days that followed moved like molasses. Slow, sticky, but warm. Silas worked with the dawn. He carved fence posts, repaired the barn door, brought in firewood in great quiet armfuls. Every time Catherine tried to help, he'd just nod and shift his work elsewhere, letting her find her place without instruction. She cleaned not because she was told, but because it gave her hands something to do. She taught the girls their letters in the afternoons, sitting on the porch while the sun dipped lazy over the hills. Silas would pass by with a toolbox, tip his hat, and listen without lingering. Still, he left things unsaid. Always polite, always distant. Like he'd built a wall around his silence and nailed it shut. But kindness has a way of sneaking in where pride used to live. One morning, Catherine found fresh eggs on the table. No note, no announcement, just 3 small brown eggs in a wooden bowl. The next day, a book appeared by the girl's cot. Worn but whole. Tales from a Trail, with pictures of horses and rivers and clouded skies. Catherine began to hum again while she swept the floor. The girls started to laugh, louder each day. Ellie told Silas she wanted to be a sheriff. June said she'd rather raise goats. Silas only smiled and said, "Well, we'll need a badge and some goats then." Still, the town watched. Word travels on horseback, but gossip rides faster still. Hollow Bend had never been kind to women who were taken in, and had no patience for men who took them. Whispers slithered through the general store and down to the chapel steps. They called her bought. They called him strange. They said it wouldn't last. The trouble started, as trouble always does, with the one who'd been told no. Dugan Hicks had been drinking since dawn. He came stumbling into the Red Lantern Saloon with a grin that didn't reach his eyes and boots caked in spite. He told the room he'd been cheated. Told them Silas Boone had no business interrupting fair business. "He bought her out from under me," Dugan slurred. "Paid double just to play the hero." Someone asked him what he planned to do about it. He smiled, teeth yellow and wet. "Gonna give her a choice, is all. Make her remember where she really belongs." The next morning, Silas left early, riding to town for nails and salt. Catherine watched him go, eyes narrowed against the morning sun. A strange tug pulled at her chest. Unease, like a cord pulled too tight in her ribs. She didn't say anything to the girls. Let them eat their porridge slow and sweet. It was midday when the knock came. Not a knock, really. More like a slam. Catherine opened the door and found Dugan standing there, swaying on his heels, a sour smile smeared across his face. "Well now," he said, "look at you. Dressed up like you belong in a house again." Catherine didn't move. Her daughters stayed behind her, just out of sight. "What do you want, Dugan?" she said, her voice low, careful. He licked his lips. "Want what I should have got the first time. You think you're too good now. That Boone fella's just playing saint. He'll get bored. But me." He leaned closer, breath heavy with rot. "I remember what John said about you. You ain't worth the dirt you stand on." Her hands clenched at her sides. Not shaking, not afraid, but cold with memory. "I suggest you leave," she said. Dugan's grin widened. "Or what? You'll sick the twins on me." And then a sound. Not loud, not fast. Just the slow grind of boots on gravel. Silas. He stepped around the fence post like he'd never left, eyes shadowed beneath his hat. He didn't speak. He didn't raise a hand. He just looked at Dugan like the world had gone silent and only one choice remained. Dugan stepped back, the swagger bleeding from his posture. Silas walked past Catherine, never touching her, never breaking stride. He stopped just 3 feet from Dugan and said one thing. "You got 10 seconds to leave, or you'll spend next 10 days drinking through a straw." Dugan opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Catherine, then turned and walked, faster than a drunk man ought to. Silas didn't follow, just stood there until the dust settled behind the man's boots. Catherine exhaled, slow and deep. He turned to her, his voice like gravel smoothed by rain. "Sorry I wasn't here sooner." She stared at him for a long time, not moving. And then for the first time, she stepped forward, not with fear, not with weight, but with choice. She reached out and touched his wrist. Only for a moment. But in that moment, something shifted. Something began. The first frost came earlier than expected. It laced the fields in white and made the porch boards snap beneath the weight of morning. Catherine wrapped the girls in shawls and pressed their hands close to the fire while she stirred oats in the pot. Silas didn't speak much these days. He never had, but there was a weight to his silences now, like he was measuring each word before it came out, as if language had grown too precious to waste. Ellie sat by the window, tracing patterns into the frost-glazed glass. June watched the flame, hypnotized. Catherine's mind, though, was not in the room. It was on the paper that had arrived the day before. No return address, just a folded page slipped beneath the gate. Someone had walked the road to Boone's land, crept close, and left it without being seen. She'd read it once and never again. Still, she couldn't forget the words. Asterisk, you can hide in his house, but not from a past. Debts don't vanish, nor do names. Asterisk, it wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. That afternoon, Silas came in with dirt on his boots and an old revolver in his hand. Not raised, not loaded, just there. Catherine looked at it, then at him. Was cleaning out the cellar, he said simply. Figured it was time. For what? Silas looked out the window before he answered. Stop pretending the storm's gonna pass just 'cause we closed the shutters. He didn't mention the letter. Didn't ask if she'd seen it. But she saw something in his eyes she hadn't before, an edge, sharpened by something older than fear. That night, when the girls were asleep and the house had quieted, she sat across from him at the table. A single oil lamp flickered between them. Shadows danced on the walls like ghosts come to listen. I know who wrote it, she said. Silas didn't react. My husband owed men, she continued. The kind who didn't forget. When he died, they thought the debt passed to me. I worked to pay it. John's friends made sure of that. But I never cleared it. Just got tired of being owned. Silas leaned back, hands clasped before him. You think they'll come? They already have. He nodded once slowly. Then he reached down and slid the revolver across the table. Show me what you remember. Catherine hesitated only a second. Then she picked it up, broke it open, checked the chamber like second nature. Her hands were steady, her breath calm. When she looked up, Silas was watching her with something new behind his eyes. Respect. They didn't speak again that night. Didn't need to. The next 3 days passed in a hush, like the land itself was holding its breath. Silas dug trenches along the fence line and buried wire beneath the earth. Catherine pretended not to see the traps he laid beneath dry leaves or the way he started watching the horizon like it owed him something. On the 4th night, Ellie woke crying. Nightmares, she said. Men with black coats and no faces. Catherine lay beside her until she calmed, then tucked the blanket around both girls and kissed their foreheads. When she stepped out onto the porch, the wind cut through her dress like water. Silas sat in the rocker, shotgun across his lap, eyes scanning the dark. You think tonight? She asked. I don't think. I wait. She didn't go back inside. Just sat beside him in the second chair, knees drawn to her chest, watching the stars disappear behind thickening clouds. It came just before dawn. A crunch of gravel. A low engine hum. Then silence. Silas stood before the truck, stopped moving. Catherine followed him to the edge of the field where the road curved sharp around the hill. Headlights dimmed. A black truck idled 10 yards off, doors shut, no sound but the ticking of the engine. 3 men, Silas said. 1 driving, 2 with purpose. You sure? He nodded. The passenger door opened. A man stepped out in a long coat. Pale, thin, but not weak. He walked with the confidence of someone who never had to explain himself. He didn't wave. Didn't shout. Just approached, hands visible, unarmed but smug. Evening, he said, though the sun hadn't risen. Silas said nothing. The man smiled faintly. Is she here? Catherine stepped forward. I am. The man turned. Catherine Walker. Or is it Boone now? You do have a talent for last names. She ignored the barb. What do you want? I want to finish what your husband couldn't. He made promises, you know. Told us you were his collateral. When he died, we were generous. Gave you time. But generosity doesn't last forever. I gave you everything, she said coldly. My work. My dignity. You took it all. Not all, he said. You ran before the ledger was clear. She stepped forward once more, past Silas. If I give you what's left, she said, will you leave? The man smiled wider. Catherine, it was never about the debt. And then the second door opened. A taller man stepped out. Not older, but heavier, with a crooked nose and hands too large for decency. He wasn't smiling. He looked at Silas like something he meant to kill slowly. Silas didn't flinch. What's this? The tall one asked. A savior? Or just the latest fool to take her in? I'm not a fool, Silas said, but I've got room to bury 3. The smile dropped from both strangers. The taller one stepped forward. You think this ends in a warning shot, Boone? No, Silas said, drawing the shotgun with one hand. I think it ends with you bleeding on my porch. The gun cocked. Silence. The man in the coat raised his hand. Easy now. We didn't come to fight. No, Catherine said, voice like ice. You came to take. She raised the revolver from her coat pocket. It wasn't trembling. The man in the coat blinked. You'd kill for him. Catherine shook her head. I'd kill for me, for the girl sleeping behind that wall. And I won't lose another inch of myself to men who think pain is payment. The taller one sneered. You think this is over? No, Silas said quietly. But it starts now. For a long second, no one moved. Then the man in the coat turned, disgust replacing arrogance. Let's go. We'll see how long the hero holds up when winter cuts deeper. They got in the truck, drove off slow. Catherine didn't lower the gun until the red glow of taillights vanished behind the trees. She looked at Silas, then at the road, then at the sky beginning to pale. We bought time, she said. He nodded. Sometimes that's all a body needs. Inside, the girls were still asleep. The fire had died to coals. She kissed their foreheads again, but this time her hand stayed on Ellie's cheek just a moment longer. When she returned to the porch, Silas was gone. She found him behind the barn, hammering a nail into a new board, patching a weak spot in the fence. As if nothing had happened. I didn't ask for this, she said. He kept hammering. I didn't ask for you to protect me. The hammer stopped. He looked at her finally, sweat on his brow, a shadow of something unreadable in his face. You didn't ask, he said. But you knocked. She stared at him a long moment. Then she walked forward and placed the revolver on the fence rail. I'm done running, she said. He nodded once. Then we fight standing. The first snow came 2 weeks later. Thick, wet, and heavy, it blanketed the hills in silence. The world turned white overnight, and the roads became suggestions rather than routes. Catherine stood at the window with June asleep on her hip, watching as the wind swept across the pasture like fingers over old wounds. The horizon was hidden. The trees stood still listening. They hadn't come back. Not yet. But that absence didn't feel like safety. It felt like pressure, building slowly behind glass. Silas worked every day, reinforcing what needed reinforcing. He turned the barn into a second shelter, lined the walls with preserved food and fuel, showed Catherine how to reset every trap, and where the best kill zones were. They didn't speak much about it, not aloud, but their lives revolved around preparation now. Defense wasn't just strategy. It was survival. It was defiance with nails and wood. The girls adjusted in the way children do. Ellie asked fewer questions and watched more closely. June had started mimicking Catherine's movements, the way she carried the rifle slung low across her back or the way she walked with her hand near the hip. They played in the snow like any other children might, but their laughter always seemed softer now, like they knew something could steal it. One morning, a red mark was left on the gatepost, 2 lines carved into the wood. Fresh, deliberate. Catherine found it before dawn. She didn't call for Silas. She traced the mark with a gloved finger, then wiped it clean with her scarf. That was their message. Silent, vile, a reminder. They hadn't forgotten. Later, she brought it up while Silas chopped firewood. They're scouting, looking for when we blink. He nodded, split the next log clean through. They think fear will loosen us. It won't. He didn't respond right away. Just wiped the axe blade, eyes on the tree lean. No, but it tightened something else. That night, the moon was a sickle blade over the ridge. Catherine kept her coat on after the girls were asleep, sat by the stove with the rifle across her knees. Silas came in near midnight, smelling like pine and gun oil. They've got a man near the creek, he said simply. She turned. Saw him. Didn't need to. Smoke from a fire, low to the ground. He's cold. He won't last long. Unless he's not alone. Silas nodded. I'll check again in the morning. Leave no tracks. She looked up. We could run. Head south. Find somewhere they wouldn't follow. They'd follow. He sat down across from her. The space between them was filled with unspoken things, what this place had become, what it cost to hold it. You ever think about it? She asked quietly. Leaving. Thought about it before you got here, he said. But I stayed. Figured if the land could bury my past, it could hold me still. She turned back to the fire. Doesn't feel like we're buried. No. Feels like we're roots. 2 nights later, the quiet shattered. June screamed first. Catherine was out of bed before her feet touched the floor. The front window burst inward, glass and snow, and something darker. A shadow moved fast, low, shaped like a man but with no face, only the glint of metal in his hand. Silas fired once. The blast lit the room like lightning. The shadow dropped. Another slammed into the door, breaking it off its hinges. Catherine was already there. She didn't aim center mass. She aimed lower, knees, then shoulder, then neck. The man crumpled. Didn't cry out. Just twitched once and stilled. Silas kicked the body back outside and grabbed the shotgun he kept hidden beneath the floorboard. 3 more in the barn, he said. Heard them moving. I'll go left, Catherine said. I know. They move like they'd trained together for years, not weeks. She grabbed her coat, tucked Ellie behind the pantry with June curled in her arms, then kissed both girls and whispered, "Stay quiet. Stay brave." They nodded. No tears. No screams. Just wide eyes and trust. Outside, the snow soaked her boots within minutes. The cold cut into her skin like broken glass. She stayed low, circling wide around the barn. Silas entered from the front. A shout, then a shot. She slipped through the back, stepped into darkness thick with breath and heat. 2 men inside, one near the hayloft, the other crouched by the stall. The first didn't see her. The second did. He lunged. She fired. Missed. They grappled in the dark. He was strong, heavier, but she was faster. Meaner. She bit his shoulder, shoved her knee into his ribs. He growled, tried to crush her throat with his forearm. The revolver was still in her hand. She fired through his chest. The blast lit the barn like sunrise. She rolled away as he fell, coughed, stood, heard another shot, this one from Silas, and then silence. She moved toward the front. Silas stood over a body. Blood smeared the snow. His left arm hung limp. Hit, she asked. Grazed. Dead. He nodded. She turned back toward the house. Smoke. The window, flames flickering inside. No. She ran. The kitchen was burning. One of them had thrown a lantern, oil and fire everywhere. The girls. Ellie, she screamed. June. A sound. From behind the pantry wall. Coughing. She dropped to the floor, smoke thick as mud, heat licking her face. She found them both curled together, faces pressed to the floorboards. She dragged them out, coughing, blinded, into the snow. Silas followed, threw a pail of water onto the flames through the window, but it was too late. The kitchen was gone. The house would follow. They huddled under the porch until dawn, wrapped in blankets, watching the last of the fire eat its way through the only home they'd had. No words. No sound but the wind. The sun rose like a bruise on the horizon. By morning, nothing was left but the barn, the well, and the 4 of them. Catherine stood by the ashes. Ellie beside her, holding her hand. June clung to Silas's coat. What now? Catherine asked. Silas looked at the wreckage. We rebuild. They'll come again. Yes, they will. He turned to her. You ready? She didn't speak. She just knelt, sifted through the ash, pulled out the revolver, blackened but intact, and loaded 1 round. Then she looked up at him and smiled without warmth. Next time, they bleed more. Behind them, the wind rose again, howling through the trees like something old and bitter, and somewhere beyond the ridge, another fire lit. Not theirs. Not yet, but coming.